Welcome back, everyone. This is part 2 of our Introduction to Melodic Analysis. If you haven't seen part 1 and you're unfamiliar with my framework of melody scale theory, you might want to check that one out and come back. Now, in our first video, we talked about analyzing a melody based on assigning a number to each note in the corresponding diatonic key. So if we take C major, we have C is 1, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Then we come back to 1 again. We also said that this method is most illustrative or sometimes yields the most insight when it's applied to unaccompanied melodies and/or pieces that are inherently monophonic, or only one melody going on at all times, no harmony, no counter melodies, nothing like that. However, when we take those same melody notes and we add underlying harmonies or chords, the relative perception of those notes can change significantly. For example, we can take this 3-note fragment in the key of C, so if we're in C, and we go. Now normally if we hear that in C, that goes 3, 4, 5. So there's usually a tendency when we hear 5 to want to hear 5 go back down to 1. So do 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 do, or do 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 do. But depending on the chord we hear underneath of that, that can change quite a bit. So if we go do do do, so that's 5 over C major chord, the tonic chord. So let's try this again. So now we have do do do. That's 5 over the 5 chord G major in the key of C, which also just on its own without any other harmony or context can also just sound like that's the one chord underneath the G. Okay, so now something a bit more interesting. Let's play that same thing. We're going to take an F major chord now. So now that G is functioning as the added ninth. Okay, going a little bit more out there. Now we're going to play the same thing, but over an E minor 7th chord. Ooh. Okay, now going even more out there, take a chord that's technically outside the key of C. We're going to apply the G to an E major 7 chord. Okay, and then lastly, we're going to change it so the G here is the top note of an extended D minor 11 chord. So all of those change the sound of the G and have an effect on whether we hear that G as 5 in the key of C and or something that wants to return back to the 1 in the key of C, which is C. So when discussing chords, we're typically going to use the Roman numeral system as found in music theory and usually jazz, also pop music, all sorts of arranging and musical theory. And a lot of you might have heard it or encountered it in some way where we just assign a number, in this case a Roman numeral, to each of the chords from the diatonic key. So in C that'd be 1 is going to be C major, 2 is going to be minor, D minor, 3 is going to be E minor, 4 is F major, 5 is G major, 6 is A minor, 7 is B diminished, and then back to 1 again in C. We can do the same thing in minor. So now let's do what we did with the last one. We start in the relative minor, and we're going to start with A minor. So A minor is going to be 1. B is going to be 2 diminished. 3 is going to be C major. 4 is D minor. 5 is E minor. 6 is F major. 7 is G major. And we're back to 1 again, A minor. Now within those chords, to talk about what tones are in a given chord, we assign numbers to the intervals similar to what we did with numbering the degrees of the diatonic scale, starting at the bottom and going up. So in a given chord, say our old friend C major here, we start with 1, or our root. Then we go up to our 3rd, E in this case, and our 5th, G. This is a triad, usually major, or if this is an E flat, it'd be minor. But we're focusing on chords built off of extensions of G major in this next part, so we'll go back to G major. Now when we go up a 3rd again, we get a 7th for C major 7. If we add another 3rd on there, we get C major 9. If we go up another 3rd, we get C major 11, which kind of has an interesting sound, and usually you'll hear that with the 11th raise with a sharp 11. This is kind of a nice sound. And then finally, if we go up one more 3rd, we get the 13th. So root, 3rd, 5th, 7th, 9th, 11th, 13th. And as we go through the chords, we'll be using that language to describe how a note's function or its role changes depending on what chord is underneath of it. If you need a breakdown of the basic concepts behind major, minor, and extended chords, I highly recommend musictheory.net. They've been around for about 20 years, probably more than that. I used it when I was in college, and I still recommend it to my students today. Now let's start with the tonic, or 1, which is normally the most stable note in a key. So we're going to still be in C major here, so we're going to start with 1. Now if we have a passage here that goes... something like that, right? We started on 1 and then worked up and down through that line until we finally went, resolving back to 1. In particular, going from 7 to 1. And 7 has the nickname the leading tone. And that's mostly because it wants to typically go to 1. It has a tendency to want to resolve there. So now, if we take that and put some chords into it, under it, or play something similar to that, so like... one still functions the same. We still get about the same effect as we got from the last example, where we got that leading tone as our penultimate note, and we heard it go up to 1. But if we change that final chord, or change that final cadence, because in this one we went from 5 to 1, and 5, the chord 5, like the tone 5, has a tendency of wanting to go to 1. So if we play something similar to that, but we sub in the 6th chord there. So before we had dum dum, but now we have it ends on what's, to my ears, a more uncertain note when we swap in that one chord for that 6 chord. And I didn't play that the same way each time. I had the same general idea of a line ascending, moving down, ascending up, moving down, and then eventually ending on 1. But we hear that change from 5 chord to the 6th chord. It's a deceptive cadence. It weakens the resolution of 1 to where then we kind of want to hear a... We want to hear something to take us back to the 1. We've created a question with the... And we want to hear an answer eventually take us back to do-do-do-do-do. So here are some examples taken from different pop music of how a more stable tone, like a 1, 3, or 5, a note from the tonic triad, can have its sound or its function or its perception changed based on the chord underneath it. So for example, this one. So that was, melody in the key of C. So 1, 5, 3, 2, 3, 5. So if we take those chords and we do... Already that 5 there has a different sound because it's now the 7th of this A minor chord. And now this next note that we're going to, this 3, it's going to have its sound altered too because the 3 is going to be the 7th in this F major 7 chord, or this F chord. And then the 3 again gets a new sound because it briefly functions as the 6th or the added 13th, depending on which terminology you use, of this 5 chord, this G chord. So whole thing again, so 7th, 7th, 6th. Another one is this one where we take that G. This is kind of the similar to the example we used at the beginning, where we take this G that's led into 3, 4, 5, and we put it on top of a D minor 11 chord, or really it's on top of a D minor 9 chord, and it's acting as the 11th by being in the melody. And then we move to 3 here over this F7 chord. And then we move to 1, a more standard resolution, over this 1 major 7 chord. But we get a very rich sound from that. And then again from... this G7 chord, and then... Now our last one is an example that I alluded to at near the beginning, which is taking a melody and messing with the chord or messing with the tone even more by using a borrowed chord from a different key. So one more time in C. So key of C, in that case, we barely even use the C, the 1, except as a passing tone, but 6, 5, 6, 2, 3, 5. 6, 5, 6, 2, 3, 5, 6, 2, 5, 3. But now we're going to go So now we've changed that D from our second scale degree. I mean, it still is our second scale degree, but we've taken it from a note that you might hear over G just going like that, going 2 to 1, to going the 7th of this E flat major 7 chord, where we would have been expecting to hear a 1 there. And then we're still going to keep it here. Again, the trick there being that normally we hear that D, especially at that point, we're expecting to hear it resolve down to back down to 1, but instead we had that major 7th chord to E flat, so taken from the parallel, taken from the relative minor. No, from the parallel minor. It's a very nice sound there. That was melody chord tone theory. I hope it was helpful. And in the future, I'm going to be taking the techniques we discussed in these last couple of videos and applying them to specific recordings and compositions to take a look at why they've remained popular for so long. Some of them are new, some of them are very new, and some of them are very old, but they all share something in common in that they have little things that you might not notice that catch your ear and generally keep people coming back again and again. So I hope you've enjoyed this lesson, and I will see y'all soon.